It's quite crazy how that perspective on things changes. I've been, even myself, sometimes between me and my wife or people I know, they go through the same challenge but have a completely different understanding of how they see it and how they deal with it. And it's just how they view it. Their perspective on what's in front of them can be absolutely opposite ends, but they're both staring at the same thing. And that story you tell yourself is the most important thing, to do with anything, whether it's your personal life or your business.
Who's coming along to Underground in February? It's New Zealand's most exciting festival of soil, food and farming, and it's once again back at Greystone Wines in North Canterbury. Looking at how things are shaping up, it's definitely going to be an epic couple of days out that you don't want to miss. There's going to be interactive talks on soil health, adaptive grazing, agroforestry and farm planning, plus music, glamping, field walks, and just some incredible food. Honestly, it's a festival for people who like to get excited about topsoil and a really good grazing wedge. This year's speakers include John Chester from The Biggest Little Farm, the man, the myth, the legend, Darren Doherty, and an epic lineup of local legends like Russ and Charlotte Heel, Jodie Roebuck, Nick Gill, John King, and Jules Matthews, plus much more. I'm going to be hosting some talks on the economics of regen transition and ecosystem payments, and as always, helping out with the infield soil sessions. So, Underground Festival is on the 18th and 19th of February 2026, and you can purchase 1 or 2 day tickets that are now live up on undergroundfestival.co.nz. Hopefully, I'll see you there. Welcome to the From the Soil Up podcast. Today's special guest is Kane Brisco. You may be familiar with his Instagram page, Farm Fit, and his book, The Tools for the Top Paddock. I'm pretty keen to have a really good yarn with Kane today. I've been following him for a number of years on Instagram, and I love the ethos that he brings to dairy farming in New Zealand, and I see him as one of the leaders in the industry. So Kane, how are you today?
Yeah, mate, thanks for that. Yeah, no, I'm really, really good, mate. Had a beautiful rain in the Naki, so as a dairy farmer in summer, it doesn't get too much better, to be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of my farmers down here in Canterbury are also very happy. It was getting pretty dry, and we've had a good rain too. So Kane, if you were to speak directly to a farmer listening right now who's feeling quite under pressure, what would you want them to hear?
I think really, for me, if I was speaking to them, I'd be trying to pull them out of, I guess, get them to take an eagle-eyed view of life and the farm and whatever's putting them under pressure. Sometimes you got to hop out of the fire, so to speak, so you can think clearly. So that's really my direction of the conversation I'd be having with them is just to take a step back, have a breather, and really, I guess, sound out what the actual problem is. Sometimes we think about problems and without understanding the causes. So I think if I was under pressure, I like people to try and pull me back a bit and let's figure out the cause of this, and also what's the ideal place we want to be when we're through this problem. So yeah, directing the conversation, that sort of direction, I think would be pretty helpful.
Absolutely. My partner actually said this quote on a podcast I was listening to that she was on, and it was, you can't read the label when you're stuck inside the jar. So I think of that as like you need to actually be zooming out to see what's happening on the outside, and I think that's a great place to start, but it's very hard to do. What's a step that a farmer could do, I guess, to start giving themselves that space to think that way?
Yeah, what a great quote that is. I think for me, I've always found a lot of power in writing things out. So I'm a bit of an thinker and a warrior. Probably not the good kind of warrior, just I like worrying about stuff. So you get a lot zooming around in your head, and often I catastrophize quite badly. So I've found a lot of power in writing out facts and just simply writing out the problems, what the causes may be, asking yourself, why is this happening multiple times to get to the root cause. I found that really powerful, but also writing out what's the ideal, after I've got through this problem, what does the ideal run sheet sort of look like after I've dealt with it, and it gives you something to focus on and something to aim for, and you can sort of break the problem down step by step. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the power of dealing in facts rather than fiction in your head.
Oh, absolutely. Are you one to write things down before you go to bed to try and like download everything that's in there?
Yeah, I do. Yep. So quite often I write out even just a jobs list for the next day, and then you don't sort of banter them, play badminton in your head with all the jobs you got to do. So I'll write them out the night before or that evening and that sort of thing, and then in the morning there might be a few more pop up that I've thought of when I've woken up, and sort of just jot them down. And once it's written down, you don't really have to think about it anymore. So I'm a big fan of jobs lists. off of the old notes in the phone. Yes, it just frees up a bit of mental capacity, I think, and you can just write it out and you can stop thinking about it there and worry about it when you need to pick it up again.
Absolutely. So in farming, we would talk about we need a lot of resilience, or we have a lot of resilience as an industry and the people within it. Do you think today farmers are carrying more of a mental load than maybe in the past?
Yeah, 100%. And that was like, because I grew up in town, but I grew up watching my uncle farm. And we used to go out there as kids, me and my two brothers, and spend a lot of time out there. And he was a single guy that ran, I don't know, 150 cows on his own. And he worked like a dog, eh? Like he did everything. He could weld, he was good on a chainsaw, did all his own fencing, and had tractors, and he had his own metal pit, so he metalled his own races with an old Ford and a fucking tip trailer, and man of many talents, jack of all trades, master of none, probably. But it was a physical endeavour back then. Like we just saw him breaking his back, and he's a bit crippled now, but all the old idiot bricks he used to make and feed out. And it was just a tough job. It was he was a physically strong, fit, typical rural Kiwi bloke, I guess, from the 70s through to whenever he retired in the 2000, I don't know, 2000 or something like that. And then I think about my farming career, and I started out dry stock, and that was pretty physically challenging. A hill's a hill and a sheep is a sheep. There's not too much technology that's changed that. But as I moved into dairy farming, a lot of it's slinging cups. Now we've got cup removers and automatic teat sprayer, so that's taken away a little bit of it. But there's a lot of tractor work, a lot of paperwork, a lot of meetings now. Like meetings weren't a thing 30 years ago when you were farming. So yeah, it's definitely changed physically, and that was a little bit of a part of me in the creation of FarmFit, was understanding that dairy farmers aren't the fit, strong, rural blokes we used to be. No doubt there are some out there. I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but we aren't. I met a young farm worker, and he'd been farming about 3 years and never dug a post hole. And I thought, fuck, this is not right. This is something's gone wrong here. But that sort of sums up for me how it's changed. Like you wouldn't have gone 3 weeks starting out farming without digging a post hole when you first started. 30, 40 years ago, it was the first job.
Yeah, rite of passage.
Yeah, absolutely. And now it is that mental load. I've got a partition off probably anywhere from an hour and a half to 6 hours a week just doing paperwork and compliance and that sort of thing. And it's a very different lifestyle to what I saw my uncle go through. He'd work like a dog, but when it came time to go fishing, he could drop everything and go fishing for the day and come back and milk the cows in the afternoon. And that was sort of the end of it. There wasn't so much pressure to perform. I think there's probably a bit more financial pressures these days. Definitely the compliance thing. So there is a lot more going on in the top 2 inches, and it can be pretty overwhelming pretty quick.
Definitely. So, Kane, for those who aren't familiar with who you are, do you want to give us a bit of a background and introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I've been, I left school at 17 and pretty much went farming straight away. What am I, 38 now? So over half my life in ag. Like I said before, I started out sheep and beef. Well, I started out relief milking actually, but did about 5 years on the beef side of things, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Picked up a lot of great skills, just, farming skills, fencing and driving tractors and working with stock and that sort of thing. And then I saw my 2 older brothers were share milking on dairy farms, and they had shit tons of money and had boats and nice cars, and I didn't really see too much of a pathway in terms of the dry stock option to sort of even earn that sort of money, let alone get to a farm. So decided to jump ship and go dairy farming, went to the dark side, so to speak. And I went straight into managing a 400 cow dairy farm, which was, I was only probably would have been 24, 23, I think, something like that. I'd done a bit of an OE as well in there. But yeah, went straight into managing for 2 years, went contract milking for a year, and then 50-50 in my 4th year of dairy farming. And probably in hindsight went a little bit too quick, but always had eyes on farm ownership really, and went, so I was a herd owning share milker for 9 years, and then went through, I guess, the ringer with the low payout, high debt levels, but yeah, sort of came through it with being a much better farmer in the end, even though I didn't think I was going to make it out. Yeah, became a lot better farmer, and off the back of that probably created Farm Fit, help others out in the community. And then, a few years ago, was that 4 or 5 years ago, decided to sell my herd, just mainly out of probably opportunities around Taranaki, and wanted a bit of a change of pace and to, I guess, probably family reasons as well, trying to move closer to New Plymouth for schooling and to be around family. Most of my family was around here, and we were living sort of an hour and a half away at the time. So a few factors that went into that, but the last 4 seasons I've been back contract milking, so I stepped backwards in some terms. But just sort of navigating through that change, I guess. And yes, currently on a farm just north Taranaki, 200 cows, do it by myself once a day for half the year. Family absolutely love it here. It's a fantastic little spot, great weather, great climate, plenty of things to do around here. So we're in a really happy little spot just on a farm. I like to take on, my wife actually said this the other day, she's like, you always take on fucking farms that require a lot of change and work. And so I like to take on challenges like that. But it also means I probably get the hard end of the stick in some ways. It's quite mentally and physically challenging, but it's just, I love a challenge, whether it's farming or personal life. I love to be challenged and to push myself to do things I haven't done before, or to upskill and that sort of things. That's sort of a big part of what I'm about really is challenging my own self, and then with Farm Fit probably trying to challenge farmers around the country to farm a little different.
Yeah, and I think you're definitely doing that, and you're creating the conversation and just bringing your own leadership to the industry by doing so. I think a lot of people are, well, especially farmers, there's quite a lot of people who are top performers, like to challenge themselves, and it's finding that community of other like-minded people that just gives them the inspiration, and I think you do that quite well. You talk about the top paddock quite a lot, and I guess based on what you've just been saying, has your own top paddock ever really been tested?
Yeah, quite a bit. So I guess probably to go back, when I was young, I was sexually abused, and I guess that's been a catalyst. Now that I look back on it, it's been a catalyst for actually really understanding myself as a human and how the brain works, and also being able to see it in other people. So I for at least 10 years was pretty angry, fucking insecure, no confidence, all of these things because of that abuse. Really stuffed me up mentally, to be honest. But there are a few things, I guess, in my late teens as an early adult going into farming and being challenged there, I sort of had to figure my shit out to make it work. And that's been a journey that carries on today, I guess. But that was really the first challenge. But it set me up, I guess, to be able to deal with some of the other challenges in life. And in terms of farming, probably the big one was buying a herd and having a lot of financial pressure there, and then going through, the payout went to like 45%. So we had a record payout of $8.40, and then it dropped down within 2 years to $3.90. I think I got at the lowest point, and that was just an absolute mind boggler. That made me dive into the depths of despair, really, and depression and anxiety, and that was hugely mentally challenging for a long period of time. It really took 4 years, a couple of years going into it, and nearly 3 years to climb. So it was a really significant chunk of my life under trying to operate just depressed and not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and that was bloody tough, physically and mentally very, very challenging, and glad I got through it. I was, in the long run, I've been better off for it, but at the time, I was in a place I really didn't want to be, and no doubt there are many, many other farmers in similar positions during that time, and it's really hard when there's not much hope. That's sort of, I'd describe the place where I was at, was I didn't have a lot of hope, and probably a big part of that was trying to live up to being the typical rural male or Kiwi male, and not show any emotion or fear or talk about it. So I isolated myself, didn't really seek help until it was the only option apart from pressing the eject button. And it was a place many males in particular, I think, probably find themselves, pride gets in the way of asking for help and all that sort of thing. And I was right there in it, basically.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Like that shows some absolute strength, and I guess that's why one you're the leaders in the industry because you can talk about these things from experience. And unfortunately, it is extremely common, particularly in agriculture and young males. Obviously, you've done some work on yourself over the time. Did you do that alone, or did you take a while to go and start investing in yourself as well as doing those quite big work, really?
Yeah, well, I probably started in my late teens, really working on myself, and particularly the top 2 inches, and trying to unravel the tangle that it was, and learn the lessons of that life was trying to teach me, maybe. So I was no stranger to that, and I actually thought off the back of that I mentally, couldn't be broken, and I would never get depressed because I was such a strong character after rebuilding myself. But yeah, you don't know what life has in store for you, really. So for me, it was because I was a proud Kiwi male. I didn't really ask for help, so it was a journey I pretty much went on alone. Probably one of the biggest helpers was actually the farm advisor I got in.
Mm.
Not that we did anything particularly specific. It was more around just he freed up a bit of mental space for me, because he sort of took over the farm plan a bit and problem solved with me and for me. That actually freed up quite a bit of mental capacity because when you're in the ship and you lose a lot of confidence in your decision making, especially when you're depressed and that sort of thing. You don't make decisions often,
Mm.
or you see, there's 10 different pathways you can take in front of you, especially when it comes to farming, and you're really indecisive about which one to take, and you start second guessing or not committing to one. He took that load off me more or less. I still had to do it, but it was just giving me do this, and this, and we're heading in this direction, and just go and execute it. And that doesn't sound like much, but it took a heap of mental load because I just had a plan to follow, and it took it back to basics. And yeah, that took a massive amount of load off that I could actually start, fixing myself, I guess, and getting myself more positive and that sort of thing. Because yeah, to go, at that stage, I was just in survival mode, right? And you actually need some mental space and mental clarity and some mental energy to start doing those physical things in your life that are going to help you make better. It's easy to go to someone depressed and say, oh, eat natural foods and cook yourself healthy meals and drink water and go for a walk every day or start exercising or go and join a sports club and that sort of thing. When you're in survival mode, then that's just too much. It's overwhelming to even comprehend doing that. You're just literally thinking about fucking putting spaghetti on toast because you don't have to think about it, and lying down on the couch and having a nap because that's all you feel like doing is sleeping, and that sort of thing. Going out and playing a game of rugby is just fucking, you might as well be going to the fucking moon, So yeah, you need someone to pick up some of that load, or something in your life to give you a bit of energy to be able to start taking those little baby steps to getting yourself right. And for me, he probably just took enough off that I could free up a little bit of time and energy. Saw a little bit of hope and positivity maybe as well, by having a plan. And I was able to start doing little things on the daily that sort of started getting me out of pretty fucking terrible situation, really.
Yeah. No, that's incredibly cool that the farm advisor was able to step in that role for you. He may not have realised at the time how much that meant, but it obviously has kept you here today, which is an incredible thing. I guess with farming, like we've got a never-ending amount of decisions, so it kind of plays into what you were just talking about. But have you really developed some tools to create a mindset now that helps to influence that decision-making ability?
Yeah. There's a few things I did off the back of that. I guess, in terms of mindset, that period of my life sort of taught me that there is a way through the hard stuff. And that was as it was my own situation, but no doubt several other people around the country have been in similar. But that was a pretty bad place to be, and if you just have the right tools on board, you can get through anything. But that does start with mindset. You've got to be open to the challenges and be able to hang on to hope and all that sort of thing. So it's created a really positive mindset. No doubt a lot of your listeners would have heard of above the line thinking and below the line thinking. How I talk to myself changed. I stopped using don'ts and can'ts and started asking more open questions. How can I get to this point, or what's the steps I need to take? Being able to break down big problems into little steps, I think, is huge. Elephant one bite at a time sort of thinking. So that they've all been hugely important. Off the back of it, I guess I created sort of a bit of I don't know, maybe some more an ethos on how I wanted to farm and what I wanted farming to look like for me. Some standing points on what I thought were really important in the farm, because at that stage I hadn't really done that. I was just dairy farming and if you're a good farmer, you'll make it in the end, was sort of the vision, I guess. But yeah, created some standpoints for me where I could put problems and decision making through a bit of a lens, so to speak, and that lens had to be, financially, put it through some financial questions, but more importantly, people questions. So I had to pass through what does this mean for me and the team around me, my family, the accountants, workers, staff, business partnerships, and that sort of thing. How does this decision affect them? And then also, how does that decision affect the farm and the cows and the grass and the fertilizer and, all those sorts of things. So I sort of had these lenses that I came up with where every decision got passed through these lenses, and it made it a lot more clearer what the right answer was, if that makes sense. So yeah, it made me develop those, which I think are super important, and a vision, I guess. I had goals. I had a lot of goals. I was a big goal setter, but I didn't necessarily have a vision of what those goals were leading to exactly. So I actually do it quite different now. Instead of writing out goals, I sit down and sort of imagine in my mind, if I'm talking long term, what does my life look like in 10 years? What's a day look like? And the goals actually come off that, rather than just, farm ownership's a goal, or buying 10 houses is a goal, or buying a fucking boat or whatever. It's actually, does that fit into the vision that's up here? And the goals get defined in that, and then you can break it down into actions and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff came off the back of it. Wish I knew that was going to happen in the thick of it. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing is you got to have a way to stay positive and open-minded, because it's easy when you get challenged and get under pressure to just tunnel vision, and especially if you're stressed, it's easy to start thinking negative. So you got to have some belief in yourself that it'll be okay in the end, and you've got some tools to figure it out.
Absolutely. There's a huge amount of gold in what you just said there. A couple of threads is like the way in which you talk to yourself is actually so important, which I've realized now, and it actually changes your mindset. Like there's a massive link there neurologically, and I've had my troubles as well in my early 20s, and now I'm like overwhelmingly positive. It's almost like I'm going the other way too much. But like when I'm going to do something where I have to speak in front of people or something, I pump myself up, and that takes away a lot of the anxiety around it. Like I do know what I'm talking about. I'm good at what I do. And just that self-talk is just incredible. And reframing, like I have to go out to farm, I have to go do this, just like that subtle thing about it's like I have to, it's like a burden, where it's actually I get to do these things, and I'm very lucky to do them because I actually really appreciate it. And the other one is around like that vision, like what if you can't visualize what your life is going to be in like in 10 years time, or how are you going to create that? And there's that power around like having a clear vision in your head. And I love that you create your goals off the back of that, because it is an evolving thing. But if you're not making your decisions today for tomorrow, you're not really setting yourself up.
Yeah, 100%. It's exactly that, and the power of your own story and the story you tell yourself, man. Like I didn't realize until I'd sort of thought about it how much that changes your life. Like it changes the whole perspective of how you see everything. And one of my favorite quotes is, "The frame is more important than the picture." And I don't know if you've heard that before, but I think it came off the back of Coca-Cola and Pepsi started trial they did where they did blind tastings for both, and then they did tastings with the branding, and in the blind tastings everyone picked Pepsi as their favorite, but as soon as they put that Coke label on the Coke, everyone picked Coke because that branding is the frame, the same drink just had that power of a story behind it, and it changed everyone's fucking answers. And that's life, summed up in a stupid little fucking drink trial. It's quite crazy how that perspective on things changes. And I've been even myself, sometimes between me and my wife or people I know, they go through the same challenge but have a completely different understanding of how they see it and how they deal with it. And it's just how they view it. Their perspective on what's in front of them can be absolutely opposite ends, but they're both staring at the same thing. And that story you tell yourself is the most important thing, to do with anything, whether it's your personal life or your business. It's so, so powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And I always, like, the way I like to reframe it now is like, I'd never speak to anyone else the way that my own brain speaks to
Yeah.
me. Sometimes I'm like, I just got to catch it. I've almost like named, when I'm doing that to myself, I've named like this little persona that's sitting on my shoulder, dirty old
That's
Gary.
cool.
And it's like you tell him to shush or go away, and it kind of like catches yourself in the moment, which is
Yeah.
quite a funny thing to do. I guess for farmers, like, they pride themselves on being quite practical, hardworking. The mindset work can sound a little bit abstract, or some people might even call it, a bit soft and not that important.
Mhm.
How do you see it as being like quite practical and relevant to actual, I guess, being successful in life and what you want to achieve, but also that farm success as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So it's something I struggled with for quite a while. There's a couple of different ways. How I framed it to myself was, I'm a tough guy. I played footy. I've been a boxer. I've been a runner. I've done a lot of hard things physically. I've worked stupid fucking hours and been through all sorts of things physically. I'm like, fuck, I'm a tough cunt.
Yeah.
And I was like, when I was struggling, I couldn't cry. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't, because I'd just built myself up to not cry over years and years, because that's what you get. That's what you see. That's all I'd seen. You don't see men cry. And I sort of sat down and I was like, what's the hardest thing I could do? Is it bottle all this up and just head down, ass up? And I was like, well, I've already done that multiple times in my life and I'm still doing that now. Or I was like, is the hardest thing I could do if I can talk to someone about it and share the struggles or cry, what's the toughest of the two? And it's honestly, it's easy for men to just fucking work 100 hours a week.
Oh, yeah.
And it's easy not to talk in a lot of ways. That's the easy option. And I thought, well, fuck. The harder option, which means it's the tougher thing, which makes me tougher, is to talk about it or to cry or to unlock some of the demons I've fucking shoved way down and within myself. That's the toughest thing I can do. So that's sort of how I gave myself permission, so to speak. And I sort of had to give myself permission. I was like, actually, it's fucking way harder for me to go and cry in front of even my missus, because I've never done that. That's the hardest thing I could fucking do right now. So if you're a real tough cunt, let's go and do that, and see how that goes. And so that's how I framed it in my head, and that may or may not work for other people. But, the catalyst for that, actually thinking that way, was my wife's grandfather, who was a tough old bugger. He was 70. He'd been a farmer and meatworks and fucking you name it. Always spoke his mind, but he got up we went to the pub for his birthday. Real big family. I think it was his birthday or their wedding anniversary. I can't remember what one. But he got up in front of the family in the middle of a pub where everyone knew him and there were shit tons of people in there, family and not family. And he cried. He talked, about his love for his family, and he cried in front of everyone. It was like, fucking hell. That was probably the first adult male I'd seen cry just about ever. I think when my granddad died, I saw my dad cry a little bit, but that was probably when I was about 7. And this was a guy that was fucking hard, fucking old school, getting up and talking about love and family and what it meant for him, and then crying. And I was like, Jesus, I don't think I could do that. And so that was the catalyst of actually challenging that thinking. I was like, that's probably the toughest thing I could do. I don't think I'd be brave enough to do it. Well, then it's like, are you really tough if you're shying away from the hard stuff, So yeah, that was my little framing. Now I sort of think about it in terms of other people. I put it across through FarmFit, I guess, of trying to be a professional farmer, much like a professional rugby player, because I don't think we label ourselves as that. You're just a dairy farmer or a farm worker or manager or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're getting paid to do a reasonably high-skilled job in a tough environment. That does make you a professional, whether you like it or not. So the attitude I've taken now is I'm a professional farmer, so that means that I have to be prepared mentally and prepared physically and have as many of my ducks in a row as possible to go out and do a really good job, not just for the profitability of the business or the farm owner or whatever, but actually for the cows and for the industry. My mindset now is is I'm the most important cog in the wheel on the farm. I used to think it was the cows, and you'd sacrifice everything to do what you had to do for them. And there's some truth to that, but also I'm the most important because I've got to be able to go out and do the right things for them, and that's decision making, being able to physically do the job, mentally do the job. So that's the attitude how I sort of frame it to other people now is you're paid to go and do a job. You'd like to think you're paid well to go and do a job. It's actually a responsibility to turn up and be mentally and physically as good as you can be on that day. It's not always going to be 100, or might even only be 50% every day, but you got to have some things in your life and on the farm set up so that you give yourself the opportunity to be really good. So yeah, just having that attitude of being a professional, and being a professional is more about an attitude more than what you get paid. You can be an amateur rugby player with a professional attitude and you'll be a fucking superstar, or you could turn into being a professional, but if you don't have that right attitude, you won't get there. So that's sort of how I frame it to others now, and with myself is that.
Yeah, that's a great ethos, and it's something I encourage as well, and I bring to my own business. Is like, if I can't turn up and be in my best, or do all the things that I know stack up and enable me to be the best that I can be for the people that I work with, and even just friends and family, I'm not doing what I could be to be the best version of myself. And if my ultimate goal was to help people solve their problems, I can't do that if I'm hungover or I feel like shit. I'm beating myself up all the time. I'm just so passionate about being the best version of myself and finding out what that is. And I know when I do that, I can actually help more people and help farmers and hopefully show them that way as well. Like, farming is a profession. It's one of the most difficult because you actually have to, especially as a farm owner, you have to be across so much different stuff, and you actually are a business owner. You're not just a farmer, and to recognise that and set yourself up with the tools to do so, and setting yourself up for success, and also your team, your animals, all of that flows off the back of it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. You nailed it with that, and it's I think at any level you can have that professional attitude, especially if you've got some got some goals or a place where you want to get to. It's probably a non-negotiable to have that now. You can't just wing it at just about any level. You've got to have some purpose and direction of where you're going, and understanding of what it takes to get there. And yeah, setting yourself up for success is looking after yourself. It's just how it is these days. Yeah, it's a very different attitude to what I grew up with, but I think it's much more positive.
Have you seen, or do you have examples of like where the improvement around your mindset has actually unlocked like better performance in terms of the farm, how the farms perform, because you're able to perform better?
Yeah, well, probably the best example I get is what I've talked about earlier, going through that low payout. The farm was really struggling through there. I had really poor KPIs on farm, and doing that work, digging myself out of the hole, getting in a team around me that could throw in some advice and other sets of eyes, and then coming up with visions, problem solving better, all those things. We turned it around into, I brought a herd. So at the start of 50/50 share milking, I brought an unherd tested budget herd. And for the first 4 or 5 years, really, I was just in survival mode, getting through off the back of that low payout. When I sold them, they were top 25% in the country for BW and PW. They were doing 100% of their live weight and milk solids. My cell count was sitting around 70,000 every year. I had one of the best repro KPIs in our vet group, which was quite a big group in South Taranaki. I was right up the top of that, well above the industry guidelines. I was carving half the herd in 10 days from the plan starter mating. They were just a fantastic herd. I was super proud of that. And, the first 5 years we went into the red losing money. And the next 4 years we made, really good money. Even though the payouts weren't spectacular, we turned it right around. It was like a completely different farm. I had way better life, farm balance. We put a lot of things in place. It took time. It takes a vision. That's why you need to be able to visualize it in your head and work towards it. It's not something that happens overnight. You've got to have a plan. But yeah, they turned that business around and turned it around for the farm owner and everything, and went from a dream to be a herd owner to a nightmare, to somewhere I didn't want to be or didn't want to be doing it, to to a place where I quite enjoyed and was really proud of what I achieved and how it was going. So, yeah, I've seen it firsthand. It was all that mental capacity and problem solving ability and having some structures and plans in place, and being positive, positive, open minded thinking and trying some new things. And that was the basis of it, really looking after myself first. And that made me a way better farmer, way better business operator. Did some pretty epic things in those 4 years. Even, starting Farm Fit and everything I did around that, writing a book, couldn't have imagined doing that 5 years before. There was just no space or energy or comprehension to be able to do anything like that. So, yeah, first-hand experience.
That's bloody awesome. What was the catalyst that made you want to write a book?
There wasn't really. I just got asked.
Yeah.
So I started doing the Farm Fit thing, and I've been doing that for probably 2 or 3 years. And the publisher actually got a hold of me, and I thought it was a practical joke at the start, to be honest. I didn't believe it until I actually held the book in my hand. Thought someone was fucking pulling my leg most of the time. But yeah, I just got asked and had a few conversations with a publisher, and they were like, yeah, we think there's enough there for a book, and I think there's a lot of things there that farmers need to hear. So yeah, it was something I never ever dreamed of. Never crossed my mind to write a book, to be honest. So it was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. Yeah, so pretty random, but I'm glad I did it because it was hard to do, but very it was actually a really cathartic thing to do, to go back and look at your life and all the lessons and how everything lined up. Like, some of the worst things that happened in my life led on years later to really positive things, and you don't see that at the time. And it's been really powerful to actually look back and join all the dots up. I wouldn't be here without that shit thing and that shit thing and that shit thing happening, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, because they lead you down a pathway that you just can't imagine, when you're in it. So, yeah, really cool thing to do. I'd highly recommend everyone writes their own book and see what it's like.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
Scary.
Yeah, I bet it's a bit scary, but it is like it's really connecting those dots, isn't it? Like, at the time, it's very hard to see, but it almost is preparing you for something later in life so that you can succeed
100%.
a lot of the time, and you don't realize it until you're like, oh wow, like, if I actually didn't go through that horrific experience or whatever it was at the time, that struggle, I wouldn't have been prepared to take on this opportunity now or gain these tools to be successful now. And it's very hard to tell someone who's going through that. That's probably not a good thing to say to them, but
it is. But you talk to people, and if you can actually get into a deep enough conversation with, it's a pretty common theme throughout life. It's hard. You don't often join them up because they're often so far apart. And I'm talking 10, 20, could be 30 years down the track, that negative experience will have led you to something positive. It's impossible to see when you're in it.
Yeah.
You just can't comprehend it. But you don't actually think about it until you go back and join up the dots. And that's something that's got to be consciously done with a bit of time and effort. But well worth it, I would say. If you ever get the opportunity, even if it's a brief story, write out the chapters of your life. It's pretty bloody cool.
And you probably realise it's not actually that brief. There's a lot of things you kind of forget that you've done in your life so far as well.
Oh, yeah.
I'm terrible for it, but like, if you look back through your phone and look at all the photos of the stuff you've done, even in the last year, you're like, actually, I've achieved quite a lot. Do you have like any favourite tools that you just love or that you can't live without that you now implement almost quite regularly or daily?
Yeah, probably a few basic ones would be, again, writing things out, dealing with facts, not fiction, and a jobs list. And everybody needs to wake up with a purpose that you're into. So I think that's hugely important. And I often have to, 2 or 3 times a year, probably stop and just take stock of life and make sure I'm still sort of living that purpose most days. I'm still aiming towards something. Another one that was really helpful for me when I was struggling, and I still do it now, is simply stopping to smell the roses. But for me, that looked like when I went and locked the cows away, instead of turning the bike around and shooting out, was actually having a little walk through the cows, petting the pet cow, and just stopping to make sure you're enjoying it, even during the busy days or the real hard times. Because if you don't stop and take some time to slow down, you just don't appreciate what you're doing, or you forget what you're working for, or everything becomes really negative, because it's a bad day's a bad day. It's pretty hard. It's a negative thing to go through. But if you can take a couple of minutes, just to stop in whether it's a cow or a tractor or your kids on the farm or a sunset or a bird in the tree. It just gives you something positive and something to be grateful for in the grand scheme of things. I think that's really powerful. And then probably the other one for me is getting out in nature, whether it's fucking a barefoot walk around the lawn. I'm a big lover of birds. Not nerdy about it, but I love a keridu or a tui or a kingfisher on the power line, something like that. And barefoot on the grass or going for a run around a reserve or a park or something like that, or a hike, or hunting or fishing, whatever it may be. But yeah, just getting out in nature can be getting out in nature, but purposefully doing it with the purpose of understanding how. I think it's important to understand how insignificant you are sometimes, and how your little spot in the world is where you are right now. It's not the shit day you had yesterday, and it's not the challenges you're going through. It's where your feet are right now. Not exactly the challenges you've got lined up for tomorrow. If you can be where you are right now is pretty basic tool, but a pretty important one to be in the present. Anxiety's living in the future, depression's living in the past. But if you can be in the present, you're usually in a slightly better place. So yeah, that'd be my top three probably is those three.
Yeah, they're beautiful, great tools. That present one is extremely hard to keep yourself there or recognise when you're not living in it. But also love that you brought that thing up about birds. I don't know what happens when you're like 30. As soon as you hit like 30, you start being interested in birds, and it happens to all my mates as well. I was like, why did we all just become interested in birds now? They look, it just happens.
It's funny that it's true. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think bird watching is that and golf are like the two fastest growing sports in the world. Like two of the biggest.
I wouldn't have picked it.
Nah, and I'm like, is it a sport? I mean, yeah, that's pretty classic. So we've talked a lot about, I guess, the top paddock mental tools, but how, like, obviously with farm fit, how important to, I guess, mental performance or just decision making on farm is actually being physically fit?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one there because I feel like a lot of my mental tools or ability to cope under pressure and that sort of thing have come from sport and fitness, and I guess challenging myself in a controlled environment. At the end of the day, you go for a run, you're in control of when that run finishes or how hard or easy it is, or a game of rugby goes for 80 minutes and then the whistle goes and then it's all over. We probably don't get that option in life so much. So I found it actually really powerful in terms of dealing with stress and pressure and fatigue, practice some of those tools. So for me, breathing was a big one actually. Breathing under pressure and how that calms the mind. So rugby and boxing were the experimental paddocks to try that and then take it onto the farm. So that's been hugely powerful. I think there's a lot of you can create a lot of mental clarity by getting rid of some physical energy and sweating it out, so to speak. And it's not necessarily going and chopping firewood, but having that purpose around it of focusing on what's in front of you, whether it's a run or lifting weights or whatever it may be, something that takes all of your attention, so that you're not thinking about the farm. That was hugely powerful for me. That was a real big part of being able to get myself right as well, as I actually took up boxing again, something I hadn't done for 5 or 6 years. And I quickly discovered that when you're sparring with someone, you can't be thinking about the farm because you just get punched in the face a lot. And that was actually a really good lesson in being present. And to give you an example, like I'd drive for an hour and a bit to get to the boxing gym, train for 2 hours, and then drive home. And for that sort of 3 or 4 hours, while I was driving there, I was thinking about the training session and what I wanted to improve on and what I was going to do. And then for 2 hours, we were just working like dogs, sparring and just the most intense exercise. So I couldn't be thinking about the farm. And then after training, I'd sort of be decompressing that training and thinking about what I did well and what I didn't. And for that 4 hours of the day was the only 4 hours I wasn't thinking about the problems on the farm. And even though it was physically, I was pretty exhausted, it actually started opening up some mental space. It gave me a break from worrying about all the fucking problems. And man, there's a heap of power in that. So not only did I have a farm consultant sort of taking some of those problems off my hands and giving me solutions and a plan, I also had this mental break from all the stress and pressure where I could just go and I couldn't think about the farm, and I think that's a really big one for exercise, whether your jam's running or surfing or whatever it may be, just a task to take your focus off it. Obviously, like I said, dairy farming's not as physical as it used to be, but a big part of starting Farm Fit was actually we go from winter, which is the sit on the couch, have a breather, have a rest, easiest time of the year. We go like carving just hits, man, and fucking, you can go from doing 40 hours a week to doing 90 or 100,
Yeah.
just like that, and it happens so quick. And I remember the first year the payout dropped, I quit rugby. I quit playing footy I had my first daughter, was just been born. So I thought, right, I'll really focus in on the farm here, and I didn't want to risk getting injured, and just wanted to focus on trying to be a dad and really hone in on working more on the farm and trying to work my way through it. And I put on 10 kilos over the winter. It was the first time I'd ever done a spring without being fit. You play footy all season, get fit as fuck by the end of it, and then you go straight into carving. Basically, it works a treat.
Yeah.
But I was coming straight off the couch, and 10 days in, I was just like, fuck, this is way harder than I remember it. And it was terrible. Like, I was getting home absolutely physically fucked. Because you chase around calves, lift them, you got to manhandle some cows, and you go from getting up at 6 or 7 in the morning in the winter to getting up at 4, and then doing 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days. That's fucking physically tough. But it's only for 2 or 3 months. So most farmers just we have this mentality of just grinding it out and hating it at the same time. But whereas when I was fit, it was hard, but it was quite manageable. And because I was fit and strong, I wasn't so fatigued physically. And once you get fatigued physically, it'll make a fucking coward out of anyone. And it'll also, really inhibits your ability mentally. You get mentally fatigued as along with physically. And I just found decision making was shit. I was started getting indecisive and just didn't enjoy it. I didn't want to be there. I was just too knackered to enjoy it. So for me, that was a big catalyst of starting Farm Fit. Really was preparing your body physically for that carving. And I always found when I was fit going into carving, it was just way more enjoyable. I was faster. I was able to get the jobs banged out quicker. That freed up more time to rest, more time to be a good dad, more time to be a husband, to be a mate. Frees up all this time. Whereas if you're dragging your feet all day, all the jobs take longer and you're just out there more, working more. And I found I'd sort of get through to mating and I'd still have a bit of energy, whereas most people are just absolutely wrecked. And then they get to mating and they're already fatigued, and it's October, November's the hardest time of the year because you still got cows finishing off calving, you got mating starting, you got crops going in the ground, you got silage, your pasture management has to be fucking on point. You got so many things flying at you mentally, and you're still physically working a lot of hours that it's if you're already physically knackered from carving, you're on a hiding to nothing really. So to me, you can't have, what's the saying I always say, great mental health comes from great physical support. So you need to do physical things to look after the top 2 inches. You can't just it's important to write things out or journal or whatever you want to do, all those mental exercises you can do, but you actually need good physical habits. What you put in your mouth is a physical thing as much as it is mental. Getting outside in nature is a physical thing, but it helps your mental health. So it's really hard to have one without the other. It's really hard to be mentally healthy without some good physical health as well, vice versa, really. So that's what it's all about for me.
So I guess a lot of farmers they already think they're pretty flat out, they're tired, they're too busy. What's one, I guess, physical habit that they could develop so they're actually, I guess, working on this so it doesn't feel like such a burden when, I guess, those tough times come on?
Yeah, I think you've got to start really basic, and it might just be going for a walk. Everyone's got 15 minutes after dinner where they can go for a walk with the family or something like that. Probably one of the most important things to do that I struggle with is you have this to-do list, right, of jobs to do, and some of them are like critical to the farming day, and some of them are things you just want to do. For example, you might have a water trough that needs to be fixed. You might have a down cow or a sick cow you need to have a look at. Absolutely critical, urgent, and important, right? But in amongst those jobs, we mix in a lot of our want to do things, and it might be painting the fence, it might be water blasting the tractor, might be fixing a broken post out on the driveway. So there's all these things, all important, don't get me wrong, but I found that I freed up a lot of time and energy by prioritising those jobs every day. And it's as simple as going through and I just write a number on them, 1, 2, or 3. 1 being critical, I've got to do that, in the next 2 hours or 3 hours sort of thing, or right now. And then the number 2s are, this is really important, probably need to get this done today or tomorrow, because it's an important task that needs to be done, but I don't have to do it right now. And then the number 3s, painting the fence, it's not really that important to make money or for the cows to survive, things like that. But it's something I want to do because it makes the farm look nicer or something like that. But it's about saying, right, when they're all in your head, you just see a list of jobs that's 200 long. But if you can prioritise them down to 1s, 2s, and 3s and focus on the 1s, you go, right, there's 6 things I need to do in the next 5 hours. And you bang through them and you go, right, what's next? And you look at the 2s and the 3s then and go, right, I've got to do these number 2s today and tomorrow, but that actually frees up tomorrow afternoon to do a number 3 or go to the gym or go and have a fucking round of golf or something. So you can start mixing up the 3s with looking after yourself. And that's a bit of a mindset thing as well, is just understanding that those 3s will always be there. There'll always be a fucking fence to paint or a lawns to mow or things like that. But it's just balancing those ones out a little bit easier so you don't get the guilt. I struggled with guilt quite a bit of leaving the farm. But that was one of the ways that I sort of, right, if I get all these 1s banged out, nothing's going to die. The milk's still going to go in the vat. The business is still going to survive today. If I can get these 1s done, there's no real important 2s that I need to get done today. Right, I can go for a run at lunchtime and have an extra long lunch or whatever it may look like for you. Is prioritising helps free up a bit of space and time, and then helps get rid of the guilt. I guess the mindset as well of looking after yourself has got to be at the forefront of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for those of us that love to be busy, we can always find another job to do. They might not be the most important, and it's taken away from that stuff we should be investing in ourselves, like going for that run or the walk after dinner. So that's a really great tool, a good reminder for myself as well. So you've become a bit of a leading role model within the whole farming industry here in New Zealand. What was the motivation behind you actually starting Farm Fit in the first place?
Yeah, I guess it was for myself. I got myself out of like that depression and stress and changed how I farm and how I was as a person. And then I sort of looked around just farmers in general in my local community and what you see on Facebook and that sort of thing in the farming community and sort of thought, man, if I've struggled, I thought I was mentally strong, and I was like, fuck, if I struggled through that, there's a shit ton of other farmers that are struggling as well. And it was really I knew that physical exercise was, a part of helping people. And that was really the catalyst. Once I got myself right, was just wanting to help others around me. And that started with the local community and just running. That's what Farm Fit was really originally, was just running a couple of exercise groups a week for the locals. And they got a heap out of it, connecting with each other and feeling a bit fitter and stronger and taking their mind off the farm. Just like it was for me, exercise was getting out and taking my mind off the farm. It was the same for them, but even better, it was neighbours connecting regularly and sharing their problems and what was going on in their life. There's a lot of power in that. And just once that happened, I was like, well, maybe we should. It'd be cool if I could inspire a farmer, a couple of towns over that couldn't actually come to my place to work out. There's thousands of farmers around the country battling that can't come here physically, but maybe I can help take that idea around the country. And that's really what it was putting it up on Facebook and Instagram. And I originally, I was like, fuck, if we could get 500 people following us and seeing that looking after themselves is really important and it'll make them a better farmer and make the job easier, that would be pretty cool. That's really what it was. I just wanted farmers to understand that taking care of themselves was more important than anything else, and that made them better farmers so that they could take care of their cows better. It didn't take away from the cows. it could actually give them more. That's the attitude really that I took on and wanted to spread really.
No, it's awesome, and obviously you've hit it quite well. You've got plenty of followers now and people following along. What do you hope when someone's like flicking through, I guess, like Instagram or Facebook, and they see one of your videos come up? What are you hoping that I guess the message that you're trying to convey to them?
Yeah, I just think I want to change that rural sort of attitude or perspective that you just have to try and be a hard bastard and work harder than everyone else and you'll make it. I actually think when you're smart, you're tougher. It makes you tougher when you do things smartly, because you can rely on that toughness for when you really need it, not just for getting through every day. So that's what I want people to get through is that you can have balance. You can be sort of semi in touch with your emotions and talking things out and learning and growing and being open to new ideas. And that'll actually make you far more resilient. Not only will it make you a better farmer, it'll make you a better person. And that's probably at the root of FarmFit. It's actually been about a big part of it is making me a better person.
Mhm.
I'm a way better dad and a way better husband than I was 10 years ago. And by and large, that makes me a better farmer as well because I'm way more well-rounded. I see things through a way better attitude, perspective, all those sorts of things. So yeah, for the most part, I just want people to be inspired, to be open to growing. If I can just prod away at a few questions that they might be nagging themselves with or don't want to answer themselves, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Just to start a thought in their head, plant the seed, so to speak, and hopefully it gets watered along the way.
Absolutely. I'd say you've definitely done that to a lot of people. And I love that you feel like it's made you a better person. I think one seed that I'm going to take away from today's chat is about that toughness, like doing the tough thing and actually feeling the emotion and crying is the tougher thing than, compartmentalizing something and hiding it away, which I'm a classic for. Yeah, I've got to remind myself of that one going forward. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate today you sharing so openly about your journey and everything that you've done and all your learnings. Like I'm sure there's heaps of gold in this chat for anyone listening. So for anyone who's listening, what's the best way that they can follow along your journey or learn more about what you get up to in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, so if they jump on Instagram or Facebook, they'll find me under FarmFit NZ or Google me or Google the old book, Tools for the Top Paddock is out there in circulation. Actually just saw it in the library yesterday. We took the kids to the library and it was sitting there, so that was nice. That's got the sort of the whole life story, the background behind it all and what's gone into making my top 2 inches what it is, I guess. But yeah, they're the classics. Facebook and Instagram will send you right.
Absolutely, and the links will be below in the podcast as well. So thank you very much for your time today, Kane. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's hit very close to home with some of the stuff I'm really passionate about and bringing to the industry as well. So thank you very much.
Awesome. No, my pleasure, mate. Happy to do it.